Okay, so we're going to talk about dividing by a fraction. But before we even jump into dividing by a fraction, we're going to start with a couple of essential properties when we multiply fractions. So let's say that I have the fraction 3/8, and I'm going to multiply 3/8 by its reciprocal. So a reciprocal is just when you flip the numerator and your denominator. So this is called the reciprocal. Okay, so let's see what happens when I multiply a fraction by its own reciprocal. So in our numerator, we're going to have 3 times 8. In our denominator, we're going to have 8 times 3. So if I follow this through, 3 times 8 is 24. And then my denominator, 8 times 3 is also 24. So we're left with the fraction 24 over 24, which we should know is equal to 1 whole. So just to drive this point home, we're going to try it with another one. So I have the fraction 5/7, and I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. So when I multiply by my reciprocal, my numerator is going to be 5 times 7. So again, I'm just flipping my numerator and my denominator to get this reciprocal. And then my denominator is going to be 7 times 5. Multiply these. 5 times 7 is 35. 7 times 5 is also 35. And again, 1 whole. So we need to keep this property in the back of our mind, that when we take a fraction and we multiply it by its reciprocal, we always are going to get the value 1 whole. Oops. So now we'll move on to actually dividing our fractions. So let's make our problem 1/4 divided by 3/8. Okay, so our fraction bar, so right here, our fraction bar is actually a division symbol. So some people, I've even seen it described as this is actually a fraction as well. We have an unknown on top and an unknown on bottom with our fraction bar. So I'm going to rewrite this problem 1/4 divided by 3/8 as a complex fraction. So I'm making a fraction within our fractions, essentially. So I'm going to have 1/4 divided by 3/8. Okay, so this is the same as this. I've just changed the format. I've changed how I've written it. So this division symbol is the same as our fraction bar. But right now, this is definitely not how we want a fraction to look. This is complex. It's not in proper form. So if we go back, we can remember, okay, if I multiply by a reciprocal, so I'm going to take my 3/8 and I'm going to multiply it by 8/3. 3 times 8 is 24. 8 times 3 is 24. That gets me a whole number. So that eliminates my fraction. So what I'm going to do first is I am going to use my denominator and I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. That way I can get rid of that strange denominator. But whatever I do to the bottom, I must also do to the top. We learned this when we did finding a common denominator and adding and subtracting fractions, that we need to make sure things are consistent. So I'm going to multiply by 8/3, multiply by 8/3. I'm going to change my color. So in my numerator then, I have 1 times 8, which is 8. And then I have 4 times 3, which is 12. My fraction bar. 3 times 8 is 24. 8 times 3 is 24. Moving on again, my 24 over 24, I'm going to change into just 1 whole. So now I have 8/12 over 1 whole. Any fraction that is written over 1 is just a whole number. So that means this can also go away, leaving me with a final answer of 8/12, which we could simplify by dividing both the numerator and denominator by 4, and we get a final answer of 2/3. So the essential step that we see here is located right here. If we noticed, our final answer is 8/12. So what actually got us to 8/12? 8/12, 8/12. Really what was happening in our denominator didn't affect our problem because all we were doing is we were creating a 1. So really, all of this is kind of irrelevant when we got our final answer. Once we got to this step here, 1/4 times 8/3, that's what gets us to our final answer of 8/12, which simplified to 2/3. So there is a rule that when we are dividing by a fraction, it is actually equivalent. It is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So 1/4 divided by 3/8 is equal to 1/4 times 3/8. That's what got us our answer of 2/3.